Karoline Leavitt had always walked around like she owned the room. It didn't matter if it was a conference hall packed with reporters or some tired old political rally where only the angriest faces showed up. She had that tight smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes, and the habit of talking over people like her words were pearls and everyone else was spitting gravel. But that Thursday night, live on national television, she messed with the wrong woman. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just any congresswoman. She was a force wrapped in silk, with a brain sharper than a dagger and a mouth that could slice through hypocrisy without breaking a sweat. Where Karoline was all screech and fake swagger, Jasmine was cool, measured, and knew exactly when to throw a punch without even lifting her hands. Quick question before we go deeper. If you were standing in Jasmine's shoes when Karoline threw that insult, would you have answered with calm like she did, or would you have lit her up right there on national TV? Tell me in the comments. No judgment. I want to see what kind of fire y'all are bringing. The stage had been set for weeks. Some genius thought it would be a good idea to toss Jasmine, Karoline, and a few other political loudmouths into a debate about race and American identity. You could almost smell the desperation of the producers trying to boost ratings. They wanted fireworks. They wanted drama. What they didn't realize was that by inviting Jasmine Crockett, they weren't getting a sideshow. They were about to witness a masterclass in dignity under fire. The audience had barely settled in. The cameras panned across a sea of stiff suits and forced smiles. Karoline adjusted her blazer 3 times before the first question even landed, like she could button herself into being right. And then it started. The predictable arguments. The petty jabs. The smug little smirks that Karoline passed around like discount candy. But then came the moment. The real moment. They were deep into a heated back and forth about systemic injustice. Jasmine was calmly laying out facts, her voice steady like she was reading the weather report. Karoline, who had clearly run out of anything intelligent to say, blurted out a line so filthy, so ridiculous, that it sucked every ounce of air out of the room. If you hate America so much, maybe you should just go back to Africa. The words hit the floor like a glass shattering at a funeral. You could feel the collective clench of every decent human watching, whether they were sitting on that stage, in that audience, or slumped on their couches at home. Even the cameraman flinched, almost missing the shot. And Jasmine? Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She didn't even shift in her seat. She just stared at Karoline like she was looking at something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Something you scrape off because it stinks too bad to ignore. All of America held its breath right then. People braced for the storm. They expected Jasmine to get up, to tear into her, to give Karoline the dragging she deserved in front of God, C-SPAN, and everybody's grandma watching at home. But that's not what happened. What Jasmine Crockett did next wasn't just surprising. It flipped the whole conversation upside down, slapped it across the face, and left Karoline looking like a soggy paper bag blowing down a dirty sidewalk. And that's exactly where the Real story begins. The clock on the wall said it was barely 20 minutes into the debate, but by the look on Karoline's face, it could have been 2 hours. Her cheeks were flushed, her jaw was tight enough to crack a walnut, and her hand kept twitching like she was trying not to throw her pen at someone. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, sat there cool as a morning breeze, adjusting her gold hoop earrings with a patience that practically screamed, "You're boring me to death." The moderator, some poor soul who clearly regretted agreeing to this circus, asked a basic question about race relations, one anyone with a middle school education could have answered without setting themselves on fire. Jasmine gave a clean, thoughtful response, citing policies, facts, and actual lived experience. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't wag a finger. She didn't even roll her eyes, although Lord knows she would have been justified. Karoline, though, had different plans. She waited until Jasmine finished speaking, barely. You could see her vibrating in her seat the way a kid does when they're about to snitch on themselves because they can't stand not being the center of attention. And then she opened her mouth. "If you hate America so much," Karoline snapped, her voice high and pinched, "maybe you should just go back to Africa." For a split second, the whole studio froze. You could hear the AC humming. Somewhere in the back, a tech guy gasped so loudly his headset fell off. A woman in the second row clutched her pearls like she had been personally slapped by the Holy Ghost. Even Karoline seemed surprised by her own words, like her brain had let loose a raccoon, and now she didn't know how to stuff it back in the bag. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't even blink. The corner of her mouth twitched, just a little, but she kept her hands folded neatly on the desk, like a queen at a peasant's wedding. Around her, you could almost hear people recalculating whether this was real life or some trashy daytime talk show special titled When Becky Snaps, Political Edition. The audience didn't know what to do. Some folks stared straight ahead, wide-eyed, trying not to react in case the cameras caught them. Others shifted in their seats, embarrassed for Karoline without even liking her. A few mouths hung open like broken hinges. The energy in the room snapped from lively to radioactive in a heartbeat. Karoline sat back, arms crossed, her lips twitching with the self-satisfaction of someone who just tossed a match onto a gas soak pile and thought the fire was going to make her look powerful instead of stupid. There was no apology coming, no backtracking, no shame, just a smug little sneer like she thought she had finally landed a punch. And Jasmine, still stone-faced, still silent, still sitting there with the kind of composure you only see in saints and people who know they're about to snatch your soul without raising their voice. She turned her head slightly toward the moderator, who was visibly sweating through his suit, begging with his eyes for someone to step in. No one moved, not a producer, not a security guard, not a fellow panelist. They all sat there, stuck between horror and awe, waiting to see what Jasmine would do. Twitter lit up before Jasmine even opened her mouth. Phones flashed in the audience. Screenshots of Karoline's red, puffed-up face zipped around faster than a brush fire in July. The hashtags started rolling in before the first commercial break. Go back, Karoline. Jasmine for president. We built this. But on that stage, the clock ticked forward. The cameras kept rolling. And Jasmine Crockett, the woman Karoline thought she could humiliate into silence, was just getting started. For a full 3 seconds, time didn't just slow down. It felt like it crawled on its hands and knees, begging for someone to break the silence. The moderator shuffled his papers like they were going to save him from the flames. His eyes darted between Jasmine and Karoline, sweating bullets that even the strongest antiperspirant couldn't hold back. One of the panelists coughed, a sharp, awkward sound that stabbed through the heavy air, then immediately regretted it and tried to melt into their chair. Karoline sat there like a kid who just peed in the pool but was too proud to climb out. Her arms folded tight against her chest, her chin raised like she had just delivered some grand historical quote instead of spitting out pure garbage. She wasn't worried. She thought she won. You could see it in the way her mouth twitched, desperate to smirk but try to play it cool. And Jasmine? She sat so still it was almost terrifying. No tapping fingers, no shifting legs, no sighing. Nothing. Just steady breathing and those sharp, dark eyes locked onto Karoline like she was measuring whether it was even worth the trouble to respond. The audience, made up of mostly donors, party faithfuls, and a few random college kids looking for extra credit, looked like they were sitting on thumbtacks. Some turned to their neighbors, mouths half open, as if whispering would make the moment less heavy. Others gripped the arms of their chairs so hard their knuckles blanched white. At home, viewers didn't even realize they were leaning closer to their screens. Fingers hovered over Twitter buttons. Group chats exploded. Grandmothers dropped their knitting. Even people who normally couldn't care less about politics, the both sides are bad crowd, snapped to attention like they had just been slapped across the face. The producers in the control room panicked. The director barked into his headset to cut to a commercial, but another voice overruled him. A smart voice, saying, "No, keep it rolling. This is television gold." Every second Jasmine stayed silent, Karoline's false confidence started to crack. You could see it, clear as day. Her foot started tapping. She picked at the corner of her notes, peeling it like a nervous middle schooler caught lying about their homework. For someone who loved the sound of her own voice, Karoline now sat there in a silence, so loud it felt like a personal attack. Somewhere backstage, one of Karoline's handlers frantically texted her, "Apologize. Now." But the damage was already soaked deep into the floorboards. The cameras stayed locked in, zooming slowly between their faces. Jasmine looking like a silent storm gathering strength. Karoline sweating through her carefully ironed blazer. Even the people rooting for Karoline, those desperate to paint her as the next right-wing darling, shifted uncomfortably. They could see it. She wasn't a fighter. She was just another spoiled brat playing tough until she realized the room wasn't clapping for her anymore. And America, from Harlem barbershops to dusty diners in Texas, knew something was coming. Not a meltdown, not a screaming match. No, the way Jasmine sat there, quiet as a loaded cannon, promised something far worse for Karoline. She was about to get publicly, gloriously, and forever elegantly dragged, without Jasmine even raising her voice. All that remained was when the first word would drop. And when it did, it would be the kind of response people would memorize, quote, tattoo if they had to. The pause stretched 1 second longer. And then, Jasmine Crockett finally leaned forward, bringing the full weight of her dignity, her history, and her fire down on Karoline Leavitt's sorry little outburst. If you're feeling that fire right now, don't just sit there. Hit that subscribe button, like, and share this video. Because if you won't even support voices standing against hate, maybe it's not just Karoline who needs to think about where they stand. Comment below and tell us, are you with the silence or with the strength? We have a target to hit 50 subscribers before the end of April, and you can make this happen for us. Please subscribe. Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She didn't snatch the mic or bark back like Karoline probably hoped she would. No. Jasmine leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table, hands folded like a preacher about to deliver the kind of sermon that doesn't ask for your amen, it demands your silence. She looked directly at Karoline, not through her, not around her, right into her. The kind of look that says, I see every ugly thing you try to hide behind that makeup and that fake smile. And then, with a calm voice that carried heavier than a gavel striking down in a courtroom, Jasmine said, I'm exactly where I belong. This country isn't just mine because I love it. It's mine because my ancestors built it. Their blood soaked this land before your great-granddaddy ever saw a boat ticket. The room didn't breathe. Not one cough, not one chair creak, nothing. You could practically hear Karoline's dignity packing its bags and tiptoeing out the back door. Jasmine didn't stop. She wasn't done teaching. Go back to Africa, she said, her tone lifting slightly, not angry but sharp enough to draw blood. Let's be real. If anybody needs to go back somewhere, maybe it's the descendants of the folks who showed up uninvited, took what wasn't theirs, and handed out smallpox like party favors. The audience twitched, unsure whether to gasp or cheer. A few brave souls chuckled under their breath. Even one of the Republican panelists bit the inside of his cheek to stop from smiling. Karoline blinked hard. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. No words came out, just a slight quiver in her chin that betrayed the sinking feeling clawing up her throat. Jasmine smiled. Not a big, wide grin, just a small, knowing curve of her lips that said, bless your heart. She turned her head, slow and deliberate, facing the audience like a queen addressing her court. I'm not leaving, she said, her voice gaining strength, rich and steady. I'm standing right here on the soil my ancestors were chained to. And I will speak, I will vote, I will build, and I will fight because this land owes me more than it owes the hate still rotting in some people's mouths. The first clap came from the back, a soft, hesitant sound, then another, and another, like raindrops gathering before a storm. Within seconds, the room erupted. Applause thundered against the walls. Some people stood up, clapping so hard you could see tears brimming in their eyes. Others stayed seated, jaws locked shut, faces pink with either shame or rage. Karoline sat frozen, her hands now gripping the edge of the table like she might fall off her chair if she let go. Her face, once smug, now looked like a deflated balloon after a kid's party. Sad, saggy, and a little bit pathetic. The moderator, sensing the shift, tried to jump in and move to the next question. But nobody cared. Nobody was listening to him. The night had found its moment. The debate was over, whether the clock said so or not. Cameras flashed nonstop. Phones shot up into the air. Clips of Jasmine's words were already bouncing across the internet like wildfire. By the time the debate officially ended, Jasmine Crockett was trending above the Super Bowl and whatever messy celebrity divorce had been headline news 10 minutes earlier. And Jasmine, she didn't strut. She didn't boast. She simply gathered her notes, thanked the moderator with a polite nod, and walked off that stage like royalty, leaving a burning village behind. Karoline, meanwhile, stayed glued to her seat, her handlers buzzing around her like panicked bees, whispering frantic plans to control the narrative before it was too late. Too late. Way too late. Because what Jasmine Crockett delivered that night wasn't a comeback. It was a coronation. By the next morning, Karoline Leavitt's career looked like a flaming dumpster rolling downhill straight into a fireworks store. The headlines were brutal. Karoline Leavitt self-destructs on live TV. Jasmine Crockett handles racism like a queen, while Karoline trips over her own hatred. When keeping it racist goes wrong. Even Fox News anchors, who usually treated Karoline like she walked on water, were stumbling over their words trying to explain why maybe she should have kept that particular thought tucked way down in the swamp where it belonged. Meanwhile, progressive networks practically threw a block party on air, complete with slow-motion replays of Jasmine's mic drop moment set to gospel choirs and rap beats. Karoline's staff tried to clean up the mess the best way spin doctors know how. Bad statements, worse apologies, and those cringy if anyone was offended interviews that somehow made it even worse. She hopped from news show to news show, pasting on the same tired, sad-face apology like a sticker on a broken windshield. Nobody was buying it. Brands that once begged for her endorsement suddenly caught amnesia. Sponsorships dropped like wet laundry. One clothing brand even posted a thinly veiled tweet. "We don't tolerate racism, not even if you wear our blazers." Donors who once wrote fat checks dried up faster than a raisin in Texas heat. Emails leaked showing campaign staff calling her radioactive and an anchor around the party's neck. Republican strategists, always eager to blame someone else for their bad decisions, whispered loudly that Karoline was a distraction and not ready for prime time. The real knife twist came from social media. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. They turned her into a punchline faster than you could say "get back to Africa." Memes exploded. One showed Jasmine dressed as the Statue of Liberty, holding Karoline by the scruff of her neck. Another had Karoline's face photoshopped onto a sinking ship, while Jasmine sailed away on a yacht called Black Excellence. Teenagers who had never watched a political debate in their lives suddenly knew two things. Jasmine Crockett was a boss, and Karoline Leavitt was that loudmouth you crossed the street to avoid. And Jasmine? Oh, she didn't lift a finger. She didn't even tweet that night. She let the internet do what it does best. Drag Karoline's pride up and down every social media street corner like an old mattress nobody wanted. By staying silent, Jasmine looked even bigger, more dignified, like she didn't even have to stoop down to collect her trophy. The trophy came to her. Meanwhile, Karoline tried one last sad Hail Mary, a fundraiser in a conservative stronghold town where they once loved her spunky, unapologetic voice. 30 people showed up. Half were there for the free cookies. A little boy in the front row asked her if she was the mean lady from the internet. Karoline smiled through it, but inside you could see the cracks splitting wide open. The empire she thought she was building was gone, burnt to ash under the fire she lit with her own two hands. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett was being invited to every major interview slot. Good Morning America, The View, a sit-down with Oprah's team already in talks. There were hashtags demanding that she run for higher office. College kids printed her quotes on T-shirts. Civil rights groups hailed her as a rising voice of a generation that had gotten too used to swallowing bigotry with a polite smile. She was everywhere, shining, steady, and strong, while Karoline faded into a sad, sweaty ghost trying to explain why no one was buying what she was still desperately trying to sell. But the true hammer didn't fall in a press room, or a TV studio, or even on Twitter. It fell quietly, when Karoline's own party sent a clear message. No more invites, no more money, no more seat at the grown-ups table. Karoline Leavitt, once groomed to be the next fiery, right-wing darling, was now a footnote. A punchline. A cautionary tale told behind closed doors by party bosses warning their interns, keep your racism quiet and off camera. And Jasmine Crockett, she didn't even glance backward. She had bigger things ahead. The sun had barely finished rising when Jasmine Crockett walked into the studio for the interview that would shake the country to its core. She didn't bring a team of image consultants or a stylist to fuss over her. She wore a simple, elegant navy suit, no flashy jewelry, no heavy makeup, just herself, powerful without trying, beautiful without needing permission. The studio was packed tighter than usual. Every network wanted this moment, but only one got it. A morning show hosted by a black woman known for asking the hard questions and never letting guests hide behind slogans. Jasmine sat across from her, legs crossed neatly, shoulders back, eyes clear. She didn't fidget. She didn't shrink. She looked like a woman who had weathered storms much bigger than Karoline's weak insult and walked away untouched. The host wasted no time. She leaned in, her voice soft but firm. When she told you to go back to Africa, what did you feel? The question hung in the air, thick and heavy. The cameras zoomed in slowly, framing Jasmine's face, calm, collected, yet carrying the weight of something older than her own life. Jasmine took a breath, steady and deep, before answering. I didn't feel hurt, she said, voice low and even. I felt tired. Tired of pretending like people don't know better. Tired of carrying the burden of someone else's ignorance on my back. The audience didn't clap. They didn't need to. They listened the way you listen to a preacher when you know he's about to say something that cuts straight into your chest. I wasn't surprised, Jasmine continued, because the truth is, black people in America are used to fighting wars other folks pretend don't exist. We fight with grace. We fight with love. But we fight because we have to, not because we want to. The host blinked quickly, holding back the kind of emotion seasoned journalists aren't supposed to show. Jasmine smiled, soft but sharp. She thought she could shame me. What she didn't understand is that you can't shame the descendants of survivors. We're made of tougher stuff than that. The audience shifted, a few wiping at their eyes, others just sitting still, breathing slowly like they were trying to hold onto the moment forever. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her voice warming, rising with quiet fire. This country is mine, too. It's mine because my ancestors planted fields they never got to own, built cities they never got to live in, raised children who were sold away from them, bled for a flag that still struggles to love them back. She paused, letting the words settle deep. I don't owe silence to anyone who wants me gone. I owe courage to everyone who never made it here. The host, who had interviewed presidents, billionaires, and activists, didn't even try to pretend anymore. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She reached across the small table, squeezing Jasmine's hand with both of hers. The cameras caught it all, not as a gimmick, but as a real, raw moment when two women understood without needing to explain anything. For the first time in months, the nation felt still again, but not out of fear. Out of respect. News clips of the interview flooded every platform. People who had never cared about politics, who had tuned out years ago, tuned back in. Not for scandal, not for gossip, for something real. Churches replayed Jasmine's words during Sunday sermons. Teachers played them in classrooms, telling students, this is what strength looks like. Parents posted videos of their children watching the interview, proud and wide-eyed. Even a few Republicans, the ones still clutching onto the last shreds of decency, sent private messages and handwritten letters, thanking Jasmine for saying what they wish they had the guts to say themselves. Karoline's name barely came up anymore, except in jokes. Memes still floated around. One showing her trying to row herself back across the Atlantic Ocean on a broken Home Depot shelf. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't a meme. She had stepped into something bigger than politics. She became a symbol that day. Not because she asked to be, but because America needed her to be. As the credits rolled on the interview, the host wiped her face and smiled. Congresswoman Crockett, she said, voice shaking slightly, thank you. For staying. For standing. For speaking. Jasmine just nodded, simple and sure, as if she already knew. She wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. And as she stood up and walked off that stage, head high, back straight, it wasn't just applause she left behind. It was hope. As the lights faded and the last clips of Jasmine Crockett's interview rolled across millions of screens, a strange, rare feeling washed over America. One too big to name and too raw to dress up with fancy words. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was a little bit of both. What nobody could deny, though, was this. Jasmine Crockett had shown everybody what real strength looks like. Not the kind that needs shouting or cheap insults. Not the kind that folds under pressure and cries foul when it gets called out. Real strength. The kind that stands up straight when the wind howls, speaks when the liars shout, and smiles when the cowards throw stones. Karoline Leavitt had come to that debate thinking she was the sharpest blade in the room. She left dull, broken, and swinging at shadows. She thought yelling "Go back to Africa" would humiliate Jasmine. Instead, she humiliated herself so thoroughly, so completely, that even her own camp wouldn't take her calls anymore. And Jasmine, she didn't just survive it. She climbed higher. She took that filth thrown at her feet and built a platform tall enough for the whole world to see her standing on it. The truth is, there are still too many Karolines out there. Too many people who think they can bully, belittle, and push back voices they don't understand. But after that night, after that interview, it's clear their days are numbered. Because the ones who built this country with their blood, their sweat, their hope, they're not asking for permission anymore. They're taking their rightful place. Now, if you felt even a little fire in your chest hearing this story, if you felt proud, angry, inspired, whatever it is, don't just sit back and move on like nothing happened. Hit that subscribe button. Smash it. Like this video. Share it. Drop a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. I want to hear it. Every state, every city, every country. This is bigger than one debate. This is about the fight for dignity everywhere. And let's be real for a second. If you're still hesitating to subscribe right now, maybe it's because deep down you're uncomfortable standing with people like Jasmine who refuse to shrink back. Or maybe you're scared of being counted among the voices that say enough. If that's you, sit with that feeling. But if you're proud, if you're tired of seeing cowards win and you want real strength to rise, then show it. Subscribe, share, speak, stand. Because staying silent now is choosing Karoline's side, and we all know how that story ends. I'll see you in the comments, and don't forget to drop your city. Let's flood this page with proof that courage still has a home.